So you've just embarked on your knitting journey. You've knit a washcloth, maybe a scarf, maybe a very basic sewn hat, and you're feeling pretty good about yourself. As you should. But now you're ready to grow into wearables proper. Things you can put on your body and actually reach for again and again. This past Christmas, my sister-in-law knit me this scarf, and I love it so much for so many reasons I can't even tell you, and I've worn it a lot. It has increases, it has decreases, it has this neat little I-cord edge, and it's very similar to the really popular Sophie scarf, though it isn't actually from that pattern. And when she gave it to me, in addition to just being completely proud of her, I thought to myself, okay, she's ready for something bigger. Then the other day, she sent me a text. We'll come back to that in a minute, because it got me thinking about how great this stage of knitting is. When things start clicking, when you realize you can follow a pattern, when you trust yourself a little more than you did last time, especially enough to give your knitting as a gift. And the question becomes, what's the smart next step into wearables? Not what proves anything, not what earns a badge, just what makes sense. Hi, my name's Taylor, and today I want to talk to you about direction. I've put together a list of wearable knitting patterns for beginners, organized into first wearables, next steps, and a small category I'm calling if you must. These aren't rules. They're just a thoughtful path into making clothes you'll actually want to wear without burning out or losing the joy along the way. And now let's go back to the text message my sister-in-law sent me. In addition to being excited to start her very first sweater, which I absolutely feel for her, she very casually mentions knitting gloves with fingers, which I love for her. Truly. We'll talk about the gloves. We'll just not start there. So this whole video is in honor of my sister-in-law. I hope she can use this. I hope she can come back to reference this. I hope she's watching, and I think that she is. Partly because I'm texting the link to her, so no pressure. So something really important to note is when I was putting this together, I wasn't thinking so much along the lines of difficulty level as much as I was thinking about momentum. What helps you build confidence, what keeps you interested, and what makes you want to keep knitting. I ended up with those three loose groupings, and we're going to begin with the first wearables category. First wearables. Encouraging projects that finish before your enthusiasm runs out. The baggy hat. This is a classic first wearable for a reason. This teaches knitting in the round and basic decreases with quick progress and a very clear finish line. And if you like the simplicity of the baggy hat, but are curious what happens when you add just a skosh more structure without changing the overall vibe, enter the baggy cap. Very similar energy to the baggy hat, but slightly more intentional. You're still firmly in friendly territory, but now you're starting to notice fit and shape. Once you've got that confidence, you might want something just as straightforward, but worked flat and worn a little differently. Kind of like the daily scarf. This is scarf knitting with purpose. Clean edges, simple construction, and a finished object that looks like a choice, not a warm-up. And if you like the idea of a scarf but would prefer something with a much clearer endpoint, the 100-stitch snood. All the satisfaction of a scarf with a very defined finish line. Great for building rhythm and confidence without committing to a long project. Once neckwear feels comfortable, hands often enter the equation quietly. Toast. This is a classic Leslie Friend pattern that I absolutely love. These are hand warmers without thumbs, which is exactly why they work here. You get small circumference knitting and wearable payoff without introducing anatomy too early. And if you like knitting for forgiving body parts, but would like something a little more substantial, try the Feeling Good leg warmers. Quietly one of the most forgiving wearables out there. Great for learning how knitted fabric stretches and moves on the body without demanding precision. Once you're comfortable thinking about fabric on the body, scale is often the next curiosity. The Dandelion Drift Poncho. This would work out to be a knitter's first real I made clothing moment. You get drape and presence without sleeves entering the chat. And if you enjoy making something that feels like clothing, but you're ready to try a sweater without committing to every sweater complication at once, the plain yoke sweater is one of my absolute favorites. It's a true gateway sweater. Simple fabric, clear construction, and a chance to learn how sweaters work as you're knitting them. Once you finish something like this, you start trusting yourself differently. Next steps, still approachable, just asking a bit more of you. The 90s. This is a new pattern and my lord, I love it. It's a straightforward garment that introduces shaping and proportion without being fussy. It's a great neck sweater when you're ready to think a little more about fit. And if you enjoyed knitting a garment like that, but you want something a little bit more substantial, the Thule pullover. This is a simple classic sweater that mainly asks you to stay with it. Nothing tricky, just consistency over a longer stretch of knitting. Not difficult, just committed. And once you've knit a couple of sweaters from a pattern, another curiosity might lead you to this. The Franken sweater is a shameless plug here, as this is a pattern written by yours truly. This one is less about difficulty and more about confidence. It encourages you to make choices, mix elements, and take ownership of the garment you're creating. After that kind of decision making, it's very normal to want something smaller and a little bit more contained without stepping backward. The Trista. A shawl that feels calm and intentional. A great way to focus on fabric and consistency without committing to another full garment right away. And if you enjoyed the quieter, focused kind of knitting with the Trista, maybe something a little smaller and maybe a little bit more simple, the Simple Thing. This is very similar to the scarf that my sister-in-law made for me for Christmas, and it's also very similar to the more well-known Sophie scarf. This is minimalist accessory scale knitting where stitch quality really matters. It's a good reset project that still moves your skills forward. Once all of that feels comfortable, adding a touch of stitch patterning is a really solid idea. The Cloudburst mitts look like they might be pushing it a little bit. However, this is a gentle introduction to lace using a single panel. It's enough interest to stay engaging without overwhelming the project. And if lace gives you a taste for visual interest, color often comes next. Oh, the coloring book raglan is one of my faves here as well. Color work layered onto familiar sweater construction, and that color work in question is really just stripes, so it's nothing too complicated. It teaches planning and restraint without making everything new all at once. After all the sweater knitting, it can be refreshing to return to something smaller again. Another shameless plug are the fire pit mitts, a classic and a favorite. This is where thumbs enter the chat politely. It's a great bridge between simple hand warmers and more complex handwear. And once you're comfortable shaping hands and wrists, finally for this category, we have the ultimate mittens. Full mitten shaping without the added complexity of fingers. A confidence builder before gloves become a personal decision. Which brings us naturally to the final category. If you must, good patterns, extra context required. The Musselburgh hat. A beautifully designed hat that is also a long-term relationship. Simple knitting, but a lot of it. And if patience is something you've discovered about yourself, it might be time to move on to this. Number 21, roll raglan pullover. This is actually the pattern that my sister-in-law shared with me that she wanted to knit as her first sweater. It's a classic sweater with a great shape, knit entirely in pieces and seamed. Completely valid, but finishing becomes a second project at the end. Some people love that. Some people discover things about themselves. Very classic gloves. My sister mentioned wanting to knit gloves with fingers. These are straightforward gloves with fingers, which immediately raises the difficulty. Small circumferences, frequent interruptions, and a lot of focus required. Mittens teach. Gloves assume a lot. Now I have 5 key takeaways I want to share with you today that all come from my experience over the years. But before I get into those, I want to zoom out just a little bit and for just a second. Because if Jessica and I, Jessica is my sister-in-law, were actually sitting together right now across the table from one another, maybe we'd be surrounded by knitting patterns, all the different possibilities for her to consider. This is the part where I'd stop pointing at various different things and just slide a few thoughts across the table. Here's what I want you to take away from the moment right now if we were together and you were about to go forth in your knitting wearables journey. And the reason I'm sharing it this way is because I know that Jessica's not the only one standing in the room at this point in this particular circumstance. A lot of knitters get here, where the excitement is real, the confidence is growing, and the question isn't, can I do this? Because that question's already been answered if you've made it this far. It's more like, how can I do this in a way that allows me to enjoy it for years and years to come? So Jessica, if we were together These are the final tidbits and nuggets of advice I would give you. And they're the same things I'd want any new knitter, especially knitter of clothing, to hear. Number 1, momentum matters more than difficulty. Beginners don't usually quit because something is hard. They quit because it seems endless. Finishing things builds confidence, and that confidence is what carries you through to the next project. Momentum is doing a lot of the emotional work here. Number 2, one new skill at a time is plenty. If everything in a project is new, nothing really sticks. One new technique paired with familiar knitting is how learning actually happens. Number 3, construction affects enjoyment. 2 sweaters can look identical when they're finished, but feel completely different to knit. In the round versus flat. One piece versus many. Seamless versus seamed. None of these are wrong. Some of them will just make you happier than others, and that matters. But I will say, you're not going to know which one makes you feel happiest until you've tried. Number 4, your yarn should be helpful. This is not the time to audition luxury fibers. Choose yarn that shows your stitches clearly, forgives uneven tension, and doesn't fight back. You're learning. Your yarn should absolutely be on your side. Here are a few very solid beginner-friendly yarn types that tend to cooperate. Smooth wool or wool blends. Look for plied yarns with really good stitch definition. They show you what you're doing clearly, and they forgive small tension inconsistencies. Non-superwash or lightly treated wool, especially for hats, mitts, and sweaters. It has grip, elasticity, and structure, which makes learning a lot easier. Wool acrylic blends. Not glamorous, but extremely practical. DK or worsted weight yarns. These yarns are thick enough to see what's happening, but not so bulky that everything feels clumsy. And when it comes to yarn that's working for you and not against you, here are a few things you might want to avoid for your first few wearables. Slippery silks and plant fibers. Single ply yarns. They tend to split and they tend to pill. Now, that comes with a little bit of a caveat because single ply yarns are incredibly satisfying to work with. And so if you find one that you absolutely love, then go ahead and use it because they really are, I don't know, like dessert yarn. Avoid very dark or very fuzzy yarns for your first forays in wearables. You really want to be able to see what you're doing. You can absolutely come back to these, and you absolutely should, just maybe not while your hands are figuring out what they're doing. And number 5 for today, the goal is wearing it. The goal of knitting wearables isn't proving anything. It's reaching for something you made and wanting to put it on. That's the win. So if you're standing at the edge of knitting wearables and you're really excited, that's a fantastic sign. It means your confidence is growing. It means you're curious. It means you're ready to make things that feel like yours and are there to help build an intentional wardrobe. Thank you so much for being here with me today, guys. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to check out the after show for this episode happening over on the Patreon, because I am going to be breaking these down and sharing with you my ideal timeline of these patterns in a particular order that I would knit if I were just breaking into wearables. And I'm going to limit that to 5. So of these patterns, which 5 would I knit first if I'm breaking into wearables, and in which order? We're going to be discussing that over on the after show. I hope you join me there. Otherwise, thank you so much for hanging out and joining me here, and for your support always. It means so much. I will see you guys in the next video. In the meantime, happy knitting, happy making, happy whatever it is that you're doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye.